So for anybody out there listening, and I know this is going to sound cheesy, but I'm telling you right now, if I can do this and I can create something that I'm passionate about, anybody can do it. You just have to find what you really, really love. And I've been fortunate enough that I've had multiple different kinds of careers and I've loved every single one of it, even when it's been the worst and I'm not making a dollar. I'm still having so much fun. And I think that's what's so important. I don't think people understand that you really have to listen to your heart and go after what your heart is telling you to do. And all the other outside noise, like your parents telling you you can't do it, your teachers telling you that you're stupid, that you're never going to amount to anything because you smoke pot or whatever it is, you need to clear all that out and then just be real with yourself and figure yourself out and be like, okay, here's my strengths, here's my weaknesses, this is what I love. This is how I want my life to be in X years and X many years, and then just go for it.
What's up, Slick Talkers? In this episode, we got real. And my guest today, John Hildebrand, joins me because like I say in the beginning of the episode, I just saw this guy randomly pop up on my feed. And I was genuinely curious because he started just making a lot of similar connections. Like all of the people that we talked to, connections that we had just kept popping up. And so I wanted to dive into his story, and John shares a lot about his struggles coming up as a child, going through school, being told that he was stupid by teachers, and just struggling with being where he was. And so, hearing his story and how he overcame this, to then now hearing about what he's doing with his ambassador work at Airbnb, how he is making an impact with his vacation rental homes, how he's helping his city with regulations and fighting the good fight to be a voice for the industry. It was super encouraging. It was super refreshing. And again, one of the highlights of why I love doing this podcast. So go ahead and check it out. I hope you enjoyed this episode. You're listening to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, a podcast for those who are in and around the hospitality industry who love, live, and breathe what they do. You can join us for candid and unscripted conversations with hospitality experts and founders as we go deeper into their personal stories while they're sharing their triumphs and trials that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and you're listening to an episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. Now, let's begin. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. And as you can see, me and John are rocking out as that intro music plays. But I'm excited to welcome John Hildebrand as my guest today. We're going to dive into a lot of your stuff. But John, I just want to say thank you for joining the show. And how are you doing today?
Thank you for having me on the show. I love talking anything short-term rentals with people, and we chatted a little bit before, and I'm excited. Super honored to talk with you and yeah, tell my story.
Awesome, man. Well, dude, you have been one, like, I would say there's been a couple people through my time of being in the industry that like popped out of nowhere basically for me. And you're one of them. I just saw it one day on I think it was LinkedIn. It's when I first saw your face and your name pop up in my feed, and then Instagram, and then just started seeing you everywhere. And so I'm curious more or less, like, where did you come from? Like what well, like this guy just pops out of nowhere, Airbnb ambassador. You have your own vacation rentals, owned and managed. So, like, tell us, where's your journey really begin for you getting into this space?
That's so funny, man. I love that. Well, I guess I'm doing something right if I popped out of
Yeah,
nowhere and all of a sudden getting discovered. So I appreciate that part. I kind of feel like I have come out of nowhere as a newbie, right? I've been Airbnb since early 2016. I was living in Malibu at the time. I was a traveling photographer, or should I say, I was a starving artist trying to make ends meet. And I had a beautiful house and I barely could pay the rent. So a friend of mine was like, "Hey, why don't you check out Airbnb? I know you don't want a roommate." And honestly, at first I was like, "Dude, you're tripping. This is the weirdest company. There's no way this is going to work. Who wants to rent a room in someone's house? Like, this is creepy. Obviously, I did it and it paid all my bills, my mortgage, everything. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. But I never really thought of Airbnb as a business. It was just strictly how do I get my rent covered? That was it. And that's kind of how my journey started with short term rental. Um, but we moved a ton of times as kids growing up. So real estate was always kind of in my back pocket, just kind of learning as we moved. But the last 2 years, yeah, I would probably say the last 2 years, I've been super aggressive in the short term rental space. With all the policy changes in Arizona, I became a super strong advocate. So I kind of had to put my face out more to help clean up the industry in my local town. And then I became, which I'm sure we'll talk about, I'm kind of rambling, but and then I became an Airbnb ambassador, which definitely led me to promoting myself a lot more and promoting Airbnb and promoting how to become a good host. And now it's kind of just been like this weird mission where I love everything I'm doing and I want to be able to educate people to improve the overall look and feel of what people think of Airbnb is.
For sure, yeah, because I think we've all seen it, and we've talked about it many times on the show through other guests. Is that Airbnb has been a great platform, but it also hasn't built the best reputation for its name, at least on the hosting side. So my curiosity coming into this, interview with you was, being an Airbnb ambassador, but then also being on the regulatory side, where you're becoming an ambassador for your city, your town, for professionalism. How have you kind of balanced the two? Because I even saw your YouTube video today. Airbnb blocked your account, and I was like, "Whoa, how an ambassador got his account blocked? Like, that's interesting." So, like, I don't know, walk me through that fine line of being an ambassador, but then also pushing for proper like professionalism on this space.
Oh man, that's a
I, we're jumping right into it, John.
yeah, we're jumping into it. So I'm always a half full kind of guy, right? I don't really like talking about the negative. I don't like harping on the negative. It happens. Big companies, big industries, there's always negative sides to it, but it's a double-edged sword and we need the platforms, right, to survive. Airbnb has been nothing but absolutely amazing to me. So I never wanted it to come off like this negative piece. Um, and to be honest, I hear about people's accounts getting suspended, but I was that guy. I was like, there's no way they must be doing something wrong. They must be setting it up wrong. There's no way it's going to happen to me. Then when I became an ambassador, I was like, okay, cool. Maybe I'll have more education, more learning on the program, which I was. And I was getting more and more connected in the Airbnb space with all different types of people that worked at Airbnb. So when my account got suspended, I laughed because I was like, oh, damn, this is real. If, and not to be like, oh, check me out. I'm an ambassador.
Yeah.
I got suspended. I was like, "Oh my gosh. Wait, I do so much with Airbnb and I got suspended? Okay, everybody could get suspended."
Mhm.
Like, it was a massive wake up call for me, and to be totally honest, nobody in my departments of Airbnb and connections could help me. There was nothing nobody could do. Nobody knew why I was suspended. They couldn't even remotely tell me why. It was just a very what I learned in the long run is that there's a massive disconnect between customer service and Airbnb. Airbnb customer service really does not talk to anybody else at Airbnb, and anybody at Airbnb can't talk to customer service. It's like the weirdest. I don't know who set that part up, but it's really
Yeah.
weird.
No, it's
Yeah.
very weird. That's very weird. Oh, and yeah, I'm like you. I would rather focus on the positive as well, but just to even become an Airbnb ambassador, for all the listeners, I'm curious genuinely. So I'm sure everyone listening is too. But how's that process even happen? Like I know we'll cover like on how you got into the industry and into the
Yep.
space more through your vacation rental property in Maui. But um, I'm genuinely like, did you reach out to them? Did they reach out to you? What was that relationship spark?
Honestly, it's such an amazing story, and I still pinch myself all the time that the way that things connected that happened. And I really don't want to say this the wrong way or take it out of context, but for me, COVID was kind of like a blessing. It's kind of like a wake up. call for me. I sold my other company. I pretty much sold everything I owned and moved to Arizona, just to be closer with family. I bought a house that I was gonna live in and fix up, and I was gonna rent it part-time, and I was going to travel and just, like, not work as much for, like, a year, right? And I was gonna Airbnb it. Well, I put it on Airbnb, and it absolutely took off. But then, like, 2 or 3 months into the process, this is where the story to me just gets insane. About 2 or 3 months into the process, the place was so busy, and I put everything into this place. Like, we gutted it down to the 2 by 4s and just had an amazing team help me put it together. And all of a sudden, I get this email, which I thought was spam, that came from Airbnb. It's like, "Hey, we're looking to work with a couple great hosts on adding you to the plus side of Airbnb." And I was like, "Oh my god, this was my ultimate dream." I wanted to be a part of the plus program so bad because to me, it was just kind of like a status symbol, and it was a way for me to explode my career way faster because the competition at Scottsdale was so aggressive and
Yeah.
people's places were so amazing. I'm like, "How am I gonna stand out?" I'm like, "This is nuts."
Scottsdale is a very, very cool city for short-term rentals. Like, there's some really awesome properties, and I'm sure I've been watching, again, like, your Instagram stuff, like, great properties that you even just signed recently, like, beautiful, beautiful locations. So, like, yeah, I love Scottsdale's, short-term rental scene.
Yeah, it's a look, Scottsdale's been on the map for years about that, and I'll talk about that in a little bit so I don't get
Mhm.
too sidetracked, but it's there's good and bad. You know, it's a
Yeah.
little bit oversaturated now. There's everybody and your mother's coming out here and starting a business. It's getting a little kind of crazy, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, I got the email. I was like, "Oh, this must be junk," and I didn't really pay attention to it. And then I got another one. I was like, "Oh man, maybe this isn't junk." So I replied, and we started talking. They're like, "Hey, we need to send somebody from Airbnb to your place and do the walkthrough." I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh my gosh, I'm gonna learn so much from this person at Airbnb." I'm like, "This is my chance to like get in the back door." This designer came with the Plus program. We sat down and talked, and she was there for like 3 hours. And she's like, "I don't really think you need to change anything. Like, you pretty much nailed it." I was like, "Wait, really?" She's like, "Yeah, a couple little things like this, like female products in the bathroom and that kind of stuff." I'm like,
Mhm.
"Okay, I can do that. Maybe add some paint on the wall, change it up." And we started going through the process. And then boom, COVID hit. And then the lockdown and Airbnb like literally wiped out the entire plus department. And I was like
Yeah.
so close to getting done. I was devastated. I was like so bummed because I worked so hard to get there, and that my team at Airbnb Plus was like some of the best people I've ever been around and work with, and they all got fired. And I was like, "Oh my god, I feel so bad for all these people." Long story short, one of the ladies there was like, "Look, I think you should be aggressive. I think you should go after it. I'm going to introduce you to the photo team because you're a photographer. Why can't you just shoot this yourself? You already designed it good." And I was like, "Okay." And I went down that hole. I was like, "I can shoot it. I can finish out the rest. I will build out my last steps with the plus." And at first, Airbnb was like, "Oh, I don't know." I'm like, "Trust me, I can shoot this, no problem." So they signed me up with the photo team. It was like the weirdest storm. Then I got signed up with the photo team. Then they had to educate me on how they wanted the photos to be like dialed in perfectly for plus. And then I just went all out. I just made sure it was absolutely perfect. And Airbnb photo team was like, "Oh my, these photos are amazing. Would you want to join the photo team all together?" I was like, "Dude, I'm so bored with the lockdown. Like, yeah, let's do it." So I was the last home in Scottsdale to become the plus listing. And I think I was the last home of the entire program before it got shut down. And so I just barely squeezed in there. And the reason why that I tell that story is because that's what led me into the back gate of Airbnb. Then I became a photographer just because I wanted to learn more. And I kept shooting all kinds of random stuff for Airbnb for the houses. And I just treated it like a way to get in the back door. It was never about the money because the money was
Yeah.
really small. I just wanted to learn, meet new hosts, and just get out there. And the photo team liked what I was doing. They saw that I was adding more homes and I was just a voice. And then all of a sudden I get another email. Hey, this is, I probably shouldn't say his name. Somebody in the
Yeah.
Airbnb reaching out. We're starting this pilot program. It's called Ask a Superhost. We really have no idea if it's ever going to pay any money. We don't know where it's going, but your name came at the top, like the top of the list to talk to. And I was like, whoa. I'm like, okay, might as well. I'm like in my house twiddling my thumbs. It was like the perfect storm, to be honest.
And was your any of your properties getting bookings during this time, or was this like the super early days when pretty much everything halted, even the drive-to traffic, kind of halted a little bit?
It's so weird because like the lockdown forced me to learn everything I possibly could about Airbnb. I read every single book. I've read every podcast. I was like watching YouTube videos like a maniac, and I was just like taking it all in, and I was just getting more and more and more excited. And I was joining little groups. I was like on Facebook, and because I had nothing to do. So it just forced me to become an expert in every part that I could. And parts that I didn't understand, I would just reach out to anybody that would pick up the phone or email or whatever. I was probably so annoying to some people, I'm sure, but I was like, whatever. And yeah, that kind of just like I think made me take so much pride in my places when the lockdown or whatever happened. Arizona, luckily, was really, really friendly with everything, and people flocked here. It was by far the busiest I've ever been in any of my Airbnb experience. I mean, I was 100% booked on all of my places in summertime, which is 115 degrees out here, and
Yeah.
we were slammed. Like, and it wasn't like I was giving the places away. The rates were still great, and it was still really good people. We had first responders. We had,
Mm.
people that were traveling nurses or people that have been working on, so hard that finally were getting the break because everything was locked down and they would stay for like 2 weeks. It was probably some of the best guests ever, really, to be totally honest. Which
Well, yeah,
sounds
that
weird that there was such a negative thing going on and then a positive at the same time.
100%. And I've had this conversation with multiple friends and even just like people on the podcast, like for outside of the world effect of COVID, right? Like I think COVID was the worst, best thing that could happen to a lot of us. At that time, I just quit my day job as a hotel manager. So like I was like, I'm gonna go podcast full time. And my parents were like, okay, we don't know what you're doing, but as long as you can feed yourself, like go ahead. And I was like, hell yeah. And then COVID hit and I was like, hey, can I move in with you? I like lost it. Like I lost pretty much every guest I was ever gonna have on the show and do all this stuff. But knowing that it was gonna come back, like my mental capacity was sink or swim, right? Like
Yeah.
we're gonna sink or swim, and I'm not gonna let this impact my sink or swim mentality. Eventually, obviously, as we know, like things work out. But for you, you previously mentioned that you sold your company before moving to Scottsdale. So what were you doing before, and what was kind of like your exposure into entrepreneurship even before Airbnb? Because I think we've all seen like we even called them, I think we called them COVIDpreneurs, but a lot of the short term rental hosts become multi-entrepreneurial because of just hosting, right? Like they get experience, they gain their portfolio, they find a passion through some kind of outlet through short-term rentals and start another business. Maybe it's a cleaning company, maybe it's a tech company, maybe or whatever. So I'm kind of curious for you, like what was your first exposure into entrepreneurship?
Deep. Good question, man. I like being on a good podcast with good questions. Uh, I don't think I've ever had a 9 to 5. I'm
Really?
actually pretty positive I've never had, like, a quote, unquote, real job. I think I've had a million little jobs, like, dude, I worked at Taco Bell, I worked at a drive-through liquor store when I was 16 somehow, which was, like,
Somehow.
the most fun job ever. All my friends would show up, I'm like, "You're 21, right?" They're like, "Yep." I'm like, "Totally. Yep." I was like, "The best job." But I learned so much about business. I was, like, always bouncing around, but I was a little punk kid too. I would get fired because I wanted to go skateboard. They're like, "Well,
Yeah.
you have to show up to work." I'm like, "Cool, fire me. I'll get a job down the street." bagging
Yeah.
groceries. It didn't matter. Like, I just it was such a punk kid, like, but I had, like, a million jobs and,
Well, can I ask you based on that statement alone, like, were you good at school? Were you the kid that was like, "I'm here for social activity and everything else can kick rocks?"
yeah, man, I was not Mr. School Guy whatsoever. Like, I remember so vividly so I have dyslexia, very, very bad dyslexia. When I was really young, it was beyond emotional, right? It was,
Mm,
like, so scary to admit it. People in class, when the teachers would call you out to read, and you're like, "I can't read this shit. It's a bunch of words on page, like, this is so overwhelming." And I just leave the classroom. And she's like, "If you
mm,
leave, you're gonna fail." I'm like, "Right on." I'm like, "I'm not gonna make it anyways. I have dyslexia. I'm not smart. I don't need school." And I had that attitude for so long, and I was in we moved, like, 20 times as kids growing up, which forced me to, like, figure myself out more and more and just be closer with my family and my friends, and long story short, I was in high school and I moved from San Diego as a freshman to Texas, and I was like a full punk rock skater kid, and I moved straight into like the ultimate jock school in Texas. And I was like a sore thumb. I got put in a small class because I was just being a pain in the butt, and I wasn't getting educated. I was,
yeah.
in the small class. So I came home one day and I was like, "That's it. I'm done. I'm dropping out of school. I'm moving back to California. I'm gonna get some random job. I'll figure it out." My mom's like, "Okay, cool, no problem." I was like, "Wow, that was easy. Sick. I'm done. I'm graduate. I'm out of here." I was like 10th grade. She's like, "But let's just sit down and we'll go over the numbers and what this all looks like." And like halfway through the page, I love my mom. She's always helping me through school. And she's like, "Okay, this is how much you're gonna make if you get a minimum wage job for the rest of your life. And oh, this is how much your car is, an apartment. This." I'm like, "What are you talking about? You pay for my car." They're like, "Not if you graduate or leave school." I was like, "Okay, what's my other option?" I was like, "This is impossible." So long story short, I found this school that was made for kids like me that had major learning disabilities or that were like artists and creative kids or got kicked out of school. And I found it. It was like an hour away from me. And I told my mom and dad, I was like, "I want to go to this school. I'll drive every day. I don't care. That's a way for me to graduate." And when we first showed up, it was like all these kids with mohawks and tattoos and smoking out front. I'm like, "This is so badass." I'm like, "This school is so fun." And my mom was like, "There's no way you're going here."
Yeah.
We walked in and instantly everybody was cool. Everybody was nice. The one thing that always stuck out is they had a one hallway full of lockers and no locks. They didn't believe in locks. So nobody stole anything. It was like classrooms could never be bigger than 8 kids in a classroom. And then that's what just opened me up to be comfortable in my own skin. I was like, "Oh, wait, there's other people like me. That's cool." And then long story short, that's what led me to photography. The teacher there was like, "Hey, I know you don't like school. I know you want to graduate. Um, why don't you pick up a camera?" So he picked up a camera. He started teaching me photography. He's like, "You can make a job out of this." I'm like, "What? I don't have to learn how to read and write and all this crap?" He's like, "Nah, dude, be an artist." And then by that, I was like full speed ahead. Started taking pictures, did the dark room, and I just went all in. And I ended up graduating a couple months early. Uh, actually got a diploma, which was like not even close to what I was ever thinking about doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my parents were super, super supportive. Otherwise, God knows what would have happened. I don't even know.
Well, I'm kinda curious because I love stories like this, right? Like, I know this is gonna tie into your style of short-term renting, like, rental hosting and all this other stuff, but, like, you said earlier on, just saying, like, you went down this route to, like, kinda discover yourself, and going through that, like, I struggled with massive amounts of depression as a kid, like, just class clown, like, I could put on a face, but home, I didn't feel relatable. I had a, brother with, Down syndrome, so,
Mm,
just never felt connected to people, even though me and him are still really close. Like, it just was so different growing up, and I hated school. I always had
totally.
a hard time sitting down and focusing, like, and I never no one exposed to me that entrepreneurship or like owning a business was even a possibility. Like I just like would drive down like through Seattle or whatever and look at all these tall buildings. I'm like, that was just like there. Like, like that was just
Yeah.
there one time. I never thought that like someone created this brand, this business or whatever. I just like it's there. It just exists.
So
And so but like for you, like what were some ways that you really had to like hone into like, okay, yes, I struggle with dyslexia, but like, did you have anything that you did outside of like even photography too, just like to really because I believe this personally ties into how you've formed your business now, like how you got to this place, right? Like
yep.
there's something inside of you that triggered, whether it was as a kid or through that school, um, that really kind of pushed you to become who you are. So is there any particular moment or like thing that you did that really triggered that?
I'm going to that school. It was I can't even remember the name of the school. I think it was called like Bending Oaks High School in Texas or something like that. But honestly, that really changed everything for me because I never saw those type of kids before. I thought I was just the only one that was like stupid. That's all I ever heard. My teachers would flat out tell me, "You are stupid. You're not going to make it." I'm like, isn't the whole point of coming to school is get like encouragement to do things? And like, it just didn't make sense to me. And the only people that were ever supported me were my parents. Like, I got kicked out of school one time for a week because I had a skateboard shirt on that said "shove it." And my mom was like, "You're kicking the kid out of school for wearing a t-shirt? How does this make any sense?"
Yeah.
And I just couldn't it was so hard for me to grasp that attitude. And it just that school was all about it. No matter what I said or what I was concerned about, the school encouraged it. They would like sit you down. Even if it was right or wrong, they would still go through the steps and the
Mm.
scenarios. Be like, okay, I see where you're coming from, John, but in the real world, this is not how it works. You have to communicate. You got to do this. You got to be able to do that. There is other people like you. And then they set me down and were like, look at all these amazing people. What do you find in common about some of these people? And they were like, I don't even know off the top of my head anymore. That's how long ago it was, but it was like Steve Jobs, like all these crazy people doing like over the top things. And they're like, what do they all have in common? I'm like, I don't know. They're super successful. They're like, no, they all have dyslexia. And I'm like, wait, what? That's impossible. Look how successful and awesome these people are. They're like, they all have dyslexia. Don't let this change your whole life. This should be who you are. You should be proud of this. This is going to make you creative. This is going to make you successful. You need to embrace it. And then ever since then, I was just like, oh, okay, that's cool. I'm down. And then I just didn't care at that point. I
Yeah.
did not care. People like, oh, you can't write. I'm like, cool, right on. I'm like, you either like me or you don't like me. But if you hate me because I can't write or spell or whatever, then there's no way I could ever be friends with you anyways. Like this
Yeah.
doesn't make sense to me. Everybody's different. It's all good.
Dude,
So
that's so
kinda
crazy.
like led me to have that attitude where like it's all like I love everybody, obviously, but it's all about me. I have to make things work for myself in order to make everything else work. People will help
100%.
you along the way, but it's about you. Nobody's gonna hand you a spoon. Well, maybe some people, but
Yeah.
you gotta work for what you want. You know, if you want something, you'll figure it out, basically.
100%. Well, it's crazy to hear just that what a difference positive reinforcement would do to someone. Like I'm gonna call her out on I haven't said her name in who knows how long, but Katie Deal, my sixth grade teacher, always told me I was dumb too. And like that shit sucked. Like going especially going into high school. So like just to hear that you had somebody come in and be like, "Look, you're awesome, and these are people that are awesome just like you," and like that positive reinforcement. So it just, I think it's so underestimated when it comes. It's not like we always. I don't think humans in general need to always be praised or always be, told that we're great because like sometimes like look, we make bad decisions, we make dumb choices, we don't think things clearly. Like obviously there's that, but
Yep.
that just I think being shown what is possible is so underestimated, especially in that young of an age. So that's really cool to hear because I think like 100% like this stuff all applies to leading up to your hosting journey and to where you are today. So thank
Yep.
you for sharing that. Like seriously, super, super inspiring. I'm kind of I'm very passionate about audio. I'm very passionate about podcasting. So being now getting for you into being an Airbnb ambassador and getting to also be involved on the regulatory side of things for your destination, right? Like being you said earlier, being a voice, like you get to be a voice. What does that mean to you as an ambassador and just even an operator daily? And then also, where do you think the industry can come together to be a louder voice when it comes to regulations and professionalism from short-term rentals in general?
Yeah, I love talking about this stuff, honestly, and I could talk about this kind of stuff for hours and hours and hours, and I do all the time. I sit on a couple different boards and I work with Airbnb, but to kind of elaborate on the policy and being a voice and just being a good host, which is being a good person and a neighbor,
Mhm.
it's really that simple, to be honest. I think there's just a lot of people coming into the business with it with the wrong mindset and the attitude of like, I'm gonna get rich quick and then I'm out. And it's sad, but it's like that with every single business there is. There's always gonna be like somebody trying to cheat the system or just make a quick buck and get out of there. And I think it's our job and our duty to help clean up that system and let people know that they're not really wanted in our business to do that because this is a lot of people's livelihood. I have no idea where I would be if I wasn't doing this. So the only way to protect that was to stand up. And a company called Rent Responsibly, if you haven't heard of them, you should 100% check them out. They're like the best people on the planet for how much work they do for advocacy work is mind blowing. But
Yeah,
they reached out to me. One of the founders, David, shout out David. I love this guy. He
we love
reached out to me. He's the
we
best,
love
right?
David. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
David, Dana, Alexa, everybody there is amazing. So
Everyone. Yeah.
shout out
Everyone.
to Rent Responsibly.
Definitely not singling out just David, the whole team over
Yeah,
there.
the whole team. Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, they reached out and they're like, "Hey man, Arizona's under attack. Would you want to help?" And I was like, "Look, man, there's a couple things I'm scared of more than anything in the entire world. It's public speaking and talking about government policy and that kind of stuff. I'm not the right guy." And David would not let me say no. He's like, "Well, why don't you just like join some talks with us? We'll educate you. We'll teach you how to talk. We'll teach you this." And I'm like, "Dude, I can't do it. Like, I can't do it." He's like, no, 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 you got it. It's fine. I've seen you. Da, da, da. And he just like helped me understand how important it was. And if I didn't do it, there might not be somebody else that would do it. And I'm like, I only have like 2 listings. Like, what about the people that have like 500 listings? Like, why don't they speak up? He's like, some of them do, some of them don't, but every voice matters. And I was like, okay. And that's kind of like what led me into, you know, being a good neighbor and building out these good policy uh best practices and um which led me to step up my game and be a better host and find out why people were hating on us so much because it was like one of those things that you would show up and you'd be like at a party or a club or like a restaurant or like a business network and they're like, "Oh, what do you do?" You're like, "I do short-term rentals." They're like, "Oh, that's cool." You're like, "Phew." Or you'd be like, "I do short-term rentals." Like, "Oh, I hate you. I hate Airbnb. You guys are the devils." I'm like,
yeah,
"I didn't say I'm sell drugs or anything." Like, "What just
yeah,
happened?"
yeah. That's
Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's usually one or the other, right? Like, especially when I talk to my hotel friends, they're like, "Oh, you have a short-term rental company? You're the worst." Like, we like, "Ah, well, thanks for that." Uh, you said you learned a lot on the way. So, like, I'm curious from from being to 2 listings to how to the amount of listings that you have now, what were some things like you said a couple times even on the episode, being a good neighbor. So, like, I think that's, like, the most underestimated thing when people get into short-term renting is like, "Hey, I'm gonna put up this property, I'm gonna make money, it's gonna be passive income." Then they find out it's not passive income, it's really a lot of work, and then they realize that, like, the same thing that happened at short-term rentals are what happened at hotel rooms. It's just in a bigger space now. Parties, unwanted guests such as, maybe drug traffic or even sex trafficking, uh, all sorts of other stuff. So, what were some things along the way that you were like, I need to either implement a better practice or a better tool?
Yeah, great question again. So, 2 things about that. I think it's two sides of the story, right? And I'll talk about the what I like to call is the people that don't know, like the neighbors that hate you or the organizations that hate short-term rentals and whatnot. Unfortunately, a lot of them just see the 1% of the news and just assume that every host is gonna be the devil and every house is gonna be this giant party and they're gonna ruin the industry and the neighborhood and all that stuff, which sadly is not true 99.9% of the time. Most of the time, it's a legit person trying to host and make a living and, enjoy the house themselves sometimes. So, one of the biggest things was trying to better understand that side. I'm a pretty open-minded person and I have no problem if they want to talk to me. And it's so funny that and there's these sides but there really is like a split. And I've had many meetings in person with the opposing side and tried to come up with reasonable and regulations together because there's no way nothing's going to change if we both can't come to an agreement. And once we sat down for an hour, we both put up our own guards for a little bit, and then we both realized that like a lot of the things that we're complaining about, we're on the same common ground. And that was a huge breakthrough for me because I was like, okay, I understand their frustration. I really do. And I feel really bad for people that have to live next door to a hell house. But let me help you educate the host, maybe. Maybe let me help you shut the house down. Let me help you show you what laws are already in place that this person could be in trouble. Like, let's work together. There's no point for us to split the sides apart because there's so much that you want that we want as well. And I think that in Arizona made a huge difference finally because we were able to take a step back and realize, okay, for us to save the industry, we're going to have to bend a little. We're going to have to give a little. And then we're going to have to clean up our side on our end as well. We're going to have to police ourselves. So I think that was like one big side of it. And then, of course, the other side is host. Unfortunately, you can't get mad at every single host. They're starting a new business. There's no college, there's no high school, there's no exam. And I might get hate on this, but I've been talking with a bunch of other hosts about this. I almost feel like hosts need to go through a certification, like a real estate license or something at this point. The industry is really big. There's a lot of people that join the industry and I get it all the time because they ask me, they're like, "Hey, am I supposed to have a permit? Or am I like, how do I protect myself on the house? How do I screen my guests? And they just don't know. So you can't fault these people for not knowing.
Yeah.
There's nowhere for them to know. So like our stuff, like our groups are trying to help educate these new hosts. Like, hey, this is how you get a permit. This is how you should do it. Here's all the laws. We're going to do a webinar on the latest update of the laws. Like, it's our responsibility as host, good host, to come together and teach all these other hosts that are going to manage their own house or their own property. Or maybe one day they want to do like 4 or 5. But yeah, it's just growing really, really fast. And we can't blame either side. It's just the whole entire thing needs to just have more education and resources to abide by the laws, I guess, or however you want to say that part.
Yeah. And my thing is I don't think it's actually sides, and I think Dana from Rent Responsibly can actually word this a lot better than I can, but a lot of the time it's not that it's the host against the neighbors or the host against the city or whatever. It's the host and the city against the bad apples that come in and become that 1%. Like, granted, can we control everything that happens? No. But can we at least pick up on red flags? Like, we know red flag reservations. Can we pick up red flag hosts? Can we pick up these things that, obviously people have, come in for the wrong intention? I think that's the biggest thing. And it's sad to hear, even just, when you're talking with David, like even some of the vacation rental management companies that have 500 listings or 500 properties don't speak up. And it's like, this is your legacy. You've built up this portfolio, this company, this brand, and you don't want to protect it for the
Yeah,
longer term. And so
yeah,
I think I I wouldn't say like a revival, but I just definitely think there needs to be more of a spark for passionate people like you and the rent responsibly team and like even Thuron Lewis and like a bunch of other people I could
yeah.
think of that come in and are like educating the space. My question to you coming out of this is more or less like I see a lot of courses be created, right? Like, hey, join my mastermind or this, like my online course for whatever. I don't, and I'll personally say, I don't think we need more courses and masterminds. I think we just, like you said, kind of more industry standard, like, hey, this is what you need to know when you get in, like kind of a vacation rental 101.
Yep.
What are your thoughts when it comes to this? Like, because I've even seen you, like, you have students, and I know you got really good educational content on your YouTube channel. Again, this is like all free stuff that I see you putting out. So, um, from the educational side, what do you think this really comes into play? And like, what's the right, actionable step for it?
Man, I'm so glad you said everything you just said because sometimes I get so excited. As you can tell, I'm a super passionate person anyways, but I get so excited on these topics that sometimes I just go down like this fast rabbit hole. And you just pointed out so many great things that I was like, oh yeah, oh yeah. But what I think to dissect that question a little bit, like the education course is one part of it, but on that is cities are, and I'll get some hate on this for sure with certain cities, but cities, right? And I'll say like Scottsdale, for instance, there's like a nationwide state law that all these Airbnbs have to abide by, right? And then there's cities that within that law have their kind of rules and regulations, right? But even as an educator and someone who sits on the board of policy has the hardest time to figure out where that information is and how you're supposed to learn about it. And every time you call the city, a different person answers the phone with different information. So I think one of the biggest mistakes right now is the lack of communication between city officials and really good hosts that are trying to clean up the industry and working together. Now, I know politicians never want to work with anybody, they're always right, but a lot of them really do want to work with us. And we've been so fortunate to be able to sit down with a lot of them that are like, we have 5,000 bills this month. Like, help us understand your bill. How can we clean it up? How can we fix this industry? And I think there's just such a big disconnect, and you can't start finding people for laws that they have no idea that are even in place and they can't even find them. So I think that's one of the really big problems that we're trying to fix up in our town. And I think more people in different cities and townships should do that. And then, yeah, the courses, the courses are interesting, man, because I see a lot of gurus that are charging people a fortune.
Yeah.
And it kind of breaks my heart sometimes because some of those, and I'm not calling anybody out or anything like that because I think there's a lot of great ones, but some of them are doing it for the wrong reasons. They're doing the education part to just make a ton of money and they're not really giving a strong value. Um,
Yeah.
I've been a part of some of those. I learned a ton in some of them, and some of them, like halfway through, I'm like, what did I just pay for? Like, what is
Yeah.
this? But there is some that I personally work with. This guy named Rob Built. He's awesome. He's got a course, and I speak on his course quite a bit because there's just insane amounts of value. So I do see the value in that. I feel with a course, if someone like me really wants to get into business and there's no one to turn to, and I'm willing to pay money to help advance that and get real education, I feel like if I pay money, I'm going to work harder to figure it out. And if I'm not paying, then maybe I'll just learn like I did, where I just went through a bazillion learning curves and kind of figured it out on my own. And then as I was growing, started taking and reading books and stuff. But there is so much free information out there. I think there's a lot of misleading information as well. But like I said, if you're a brand new host, shameless plug, if you're a brand new host, take advantage of the Ask a Superhost program because it's 100% free. And Airbnb really, really, really is trying to educate new hosts on best practices and, at least get them started in the right direction from ground zero. And there's a bunch of really great super hosts that I'm fortunate enough to be around. So that's like one way. And I see VRBO also is doing a bunch of amazing stuff to try to educate hosts from the very beginning on best practices and whatnot. And feel like that is going to be really important. Um, yeah, I know that was like a long-ended answer to it.
No, you're good. I'm all about long-winded answers. No, I don't know. We've been, yeah, not to like call people out, but like there's been so many, I think, great people, a lot of them within our podcast network, do have masterminds and they do work with like one-on-one people that have gone from 0 to 50 properties in 2 or 3 months, and they're implementing these best practices and stuff like that. So like shout out to those people that are dedicating that type of time.
Yep.
But then, like you said, there are those that you could definitely see from their content and the way they give themselves off. It's definitely a cash grab, and unfortunately, that um, is very deceiving, and people buy into it, and then they have a bad taste in their mouth, or they maybe do get something from it, and whatever. But the hardest part I think is how do we get everyone on the same page when it's so fragmented, right? Every house is so different, every destination is different. Like some places you like, we have one property in Kissimmee, Florida. You need a permit for it. We have another place in downtown Seattle. You need a permit. Great. Different processes of getting those permits, but everywhere else that we have management properties in, no permits, no nothing. Like,
Yeah.
don't need to be a real estate broker. You don't need to do this. You don't need to do that. So, um, again, like, where do you go to even figure out laws? Like, where do you go to figure out best practices? Where do you go to figure out the best tech, the best, implementation of growth and hospitality in general, because um, you're not just a host with a home, you're dealing with people and their vacations and making memories and all the other geeky stuff I get excited about. But yeah, it's like it's just one of those
Yeah,
things
it's
that
so
I'm constantly
true.
thinking about with how fragmented we are. But
It's so true, man. You're so spot on. You're on to something so beyond what's going on, right? It's because if you're brand new, it's like it's almost overwhelming also because you're really trying to learn it all. And then
yeah,
you're like, well, where do I turn to? Who's real? Who's not real? Um, Obviously you just gotta listen to this podcast, get some gems all the time. But like it's hard to figure out who's real and who's not, right? And
yeah,
who can smoke the mirrors. I mean, I'll be totally honest. I struggle with that all the time when I put out content
yeah,
for even myself because I'm like, man, if somebody sees this for the first time, are they gonna be like, who is this dork? Like,
yeah,
like, does this person even know what he's talking about? And it's so important to give out content like that people can actually learn and it's beneficial. And I hope people can see through a lot of those people that may have a hidden agenda, but there's some really great people out there that giving out insane amounts of free content all the time. Um,
100%.
just I think you just got to do your research, like you said. I don't know how you clean it up. I don't know if there's like a real estate course.
Yeah,
Eventually, does everybody who's a host have I don't know. I don't know what that answer is, but I would love to start working with a group to figure that out because it would be a fun challenge to try to figure that out.
for sure. Well, I think Airbnb, and not in a negative way, but like I think Airbnb has a huge responsibility on
Yeah.
their shoulders for the brand that they've built, for the reputation that they have, whether it's good or bad. That this is something that needs to be also an like it. I don't think this could be a one side does it and then the rest just kind of like, okay, sure,
Yep.
go create a course, go create this, go do whatever. I think like companies like Verbo, Airbnb, the tech providers, whether they're property management software, pricing, insurance, you name it, like, and then the hosts, the bigger PMs that have been doing it for 20 years, the hosts that have been maybe gone from 2 to 10 properties, like we all need to kind of come together and say, hey, like this is what we all agree on being standard, quality, professional, all the way above, all the above. So it's gonna take everybody, I think, but will we get to
Yeah.
that point? maybe that's a question for episode number 2 or part 2 of this one. We could always figure that out. But yeah,
Totally.
it's just a very interesting question to even think about. What does it take? So
Yeah, it is, man.
yeah,
I would love to start figuring it out more because it's complex for sure. By no,
yeah,
but I mean, even when I was working with the policy was the first time where I saw a lot of people come together, and that was really, really awesome, and it's been really awesome. Like, I get to work with the policy people at VRBO and Airbnb, and we all get to sit at the same table and talk.
that's
Like,
cool.
it's pretty awesome because they're obviously business rivals, but when it
Yeah.
comes to this, we're all on the same page. And that has been just absolutely amazing to be a part of and watch, and then to see people really trying to help and like come together and be like, "Hey, my neighbor is a bad host. Like, we need to go and knock on the door and let it and introduce ourselves and try to help them understand how bad this is hurting everybody." So, I think there's some really strong positive changes happening, at least around here.
I love that. I love to hear it, and because again, we can hear about all the bad things, like, on our
Yeah.
morning show, like, last week, we talked about Airbnb's new, like, cancellation policy, and we're kinda dogging on it, but, like, we could always, go the negative route, but I think just to hear even that, like, we can get Vrbo and Airbnb to the same table together, like, that's already a win, I think, right there in itself.
Yep. Yep.
We just need to see, again, and the hardest part is, like, we're in this industry so much, like, we're in the day to day that it you we I think sometimes lose sight of the long game, right? Like, this isn't something that's gonna happen overnight. This may not be something that's gonna happen within the next 5 or 10 years, but it needs to start, and it needs to start somewhere and
Yep.
sometime, so why not be now? So yeah, anyways, I can go on forever, but John,
Me
I
too. I
wanna
can too. Let's go.
I was like, I wanna respect your time and everything that you got going on, but, just for the listeners out there, one of the fewer questions I always like to ask is, like, what with everything you've gone through from entrepreneurship to, getting through your dyslexia and like the negative mindset that was, pounded into you early on to now where you are today with, just saying like, I'm going to learn as much as I can. I'm going to do the best that I can and I'm going to have fun doing it and, be a part of the solution rather than the problem. What would you say out of everything, good and bad, that is something you've been able to take away and that you think anyone listening could take away too?
How much time do you got?
We got as much time as you need.
You know what, man? I have to first start off by saying that I'm just so blessed and honored to be where I'm at today, right? In so many levels. Like, everybody has a story, everybody has a struggle, but I'm so happy that I am who I am because that was has helped me become successful. Never in a million years did I think I would be able to buy my own house, let alone buy 3 homes that I own. Never in a million years. If you would ask a young John as a 16-year-old kid, there's no way. I'd be like, "Oh, skateboard, whatever." I just didn't think it would ever be possible. So, for anybody out there listening, and I know this is gonna sound cheesy, but I'm telling you right now, if I can do this and I can create something that I'm passionate about, anybody can do it. You just have to find what you really, really love. And I've been fortunate enough that I've had multiple different kinds of careers and I've loved every single one of it, even when it's been the worst and I'm not making a dollar. I'm still having so much fun. And I think that's what's so important. I don't think people understand that you really have to listen to your heart and go after what your heart is telling you to do. And all the other outside noise, like your parents telling you you can't do it, your teachers telling you that you're stupid, that you're never going to amount to anything because you smoke pot or whatever it is, you need to clear all that out and then just be real with yourself and figure yourself out and be like, okay, here's my strengths, here's my weaknesses, this is what I love. This is how I want my life to be in X years and X many years. And then just go for it and watch. I'm telling you right now, because I've seen it firsthand when I started writing things down of like, I want one house, I want two house, I want X amount of dollars, I want to be happy, I want more freedom. once I started really mapping my life out, it just kept happening. And then all those people that would hate on me or say, what am I doing? I'm not going to be able to make it, are now calling me like, hey, so I'm trying to do this or that. Can I pick your brain, get some advice? I'm like, yeah, you can pay me for it. But it's just like, it's just funny how all of a sudden things will change, right? You just have to, I know it sounds cheesy or whatever, but my dad is like the prime example, right? He grew up dirt poor, had nothing, got his way to college, started getting a job, didn't finish college, and then became the executive vice president of New York Life Insurance, which is pretty much the biggest insurance company in the United States with no degree. And he always would push us like, hey, I did what I loved and I knew where I was going. And if you are diehard in what you love and you know the direction you want to go and you're a good person and you're going to keep pushing good vibes out and just work really, really hard, you can achieve whatever you want. And I think that's like always stuck with me that like, no matter what, if you work really hard, I'll figure it out. Somehow I'll figure it out. And I've been insanely honored to like build trust with people to let me manage their house if I don't own it, or let somebody partner with me and we'll buy a house together and I'll do everything and just growing slow and just learning. Don't forget, literally always learn. I'm always learning and educating and listening to podcasts like this and just like I'm a sponge. So I know I kind of went off on a tangent a little bit, but I am passionate about that, and I'm really passionate person anyways. But I just think you got to go and do what makes you happy, basically.
100%. And yeah, and well, and you never know where that's gonna be. Some people think I need to be a firefighter, I need to be a police officer, I need to be a pastor or this or that. And then all of a sudden you get stumbled into this thing called Airbnb or short-term rentals or hospitality or restaurant management or revenue management or retail, e-commerce. Like the amount of stuff that you can fall into nowadays is pretty awesome. So
Yeah,
thankfully, we're in this generation where we don't have to just pick like a trade job and work it for 30 years and retire. We can actually like find something that we're actually really passionate about. So I seriously love everything you just said. And then the last final question where we ask every guest, where can people find you if they want to reach out or connect or learn more about who you are,
should I just shut down all my channels? You're like,
all of them?
like- yeah. You're like, well, you just popped up out of nowhere. And you did say it. You can pretty much find me everywhere at this point now. My Instagram, I'm really, really active on my Instagram. This is John Hildebrand Sicky. Sicky's kind of my nickname. I'm on YouTube under Hildy Homes. My website is hildyhomes.com. You can see all my listings and some advocacy stuff that I'm working on and whatnot. But yeah, I'm pretty open. I love reading the comments when people write comments of questions and stuff. So yeah, reach out. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on oh, don't even get me started on TikTok. I think I'm too old for TikTok. I can't figure it out for the life of me.
I
But
always
other than
tell
that,
people
yeah,
I'm a
everywhere else.
yeah, I always tell people with TikTok, I'm a consumer, not a producer of content there. I'm trying to like repurpose my reels into
Yeah,
TikTok, and it's really rough. So
it's rough. It's
yeah,
rough. Yeah, it's rough. Yeah.
awesome. Well, I want to say personally, thank you for jumping on the podcast and just being as open and vulnerable as you have been, and just for sharing your story. I think this is what I love to do, and so like just to get some enjoyment out of this conversation. I think I get a lot more out of this than a lot of our listeners do sometimes. But at the end of the day, I just appreciate your honesty and your openness. And for everyone who's out there listening or watching this live stream or the replay, just know that you can check out everything in the show notes and connect with John directly. If not, I will be happy to make an introduction. But until next week, we'll see you all again very soon. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast. So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week.